Right. So, thanks to Vijay, we actually, just thought about the word dojo, and we also got to hear that, the word dojo is also used in medical terms. So that's something I really was not aware about. So thank you for that. Today's session is primarily focusing on dojo, not the coding dojos or the dojos that we've heard a lot about, but probably talking about dojo, how it can be applied into our organization or our team, similar to how we apply agile or any of the other frameworks and methodologies in an organization. And dojo, if you look at it, today's session is going to be focused on the learning aspect. So if you know the word dojo from the Japanese word, it talks a lot about learning. So we are going to try and understand that when we apply dojo within our teams or organizations, how do we hit a balance between the learning and the delivery? And what is it that dojo is all about in terms of applying it, the outcomes in relation to that? And then finally, I'm going to put a caveat. All in this session is going to be about knowing about dojo. It is not, and I will not make you all biased on whether I believe in dojo or I don't. It's going to be a learning session. And probably, if we can always connect later, and I would love to know your thoughts, because dojo conversations always trigger thoughts around the feasibility of these things. So it's going to be very unbiased presentation and session. And probably if we have time at the end, we'll have a quick chat on what do you all think about dojo and applying it within your teams, your organizations. um, a little bit about me. So usually I have a slide with my experience and my certifications and all of that, but I said, why not try and make it a little different? So I believe very strongly that your certifications are very important for learning, and they are a platform for us to elevate and at least get a little bit into what these knowledge packets are. But I do believe everything is built on experience, and experience is what helps the knowledge you've gained from training to get enhanced and being able to practically apply it. So I will talk a little bit about myself. As you know, my name's Carol Matrani. I've been in the IT industry for almost around 17 years. I started off in a very typical way into program management, project management. I am in a financial domain, so I have been, done my master's in finance, that to business finance. I also did my business law. So a lot of things that are very diversified, if you see there. But as I moved ahead from project and program management, I got into the role of a product owner. And then I got into the role of an agile coach. So the product owner role really made me understand the value around, coaching. And then I decided to spend almost around 10 years of my career into coaching, and specifically into agile coaching. I also have been part of the development team. So I have been a developer. I was also a development manager. So I have tried and put on different hats. Certifications, the regular certifications, I'm a certified safe agilist, a scrum master, a certified product owner. And lately I have been very lucky to be part of Manju and Viji's sessions on enterprise transformation and coaching agile transitions. So these, again, need of the hour, my organization is going through a transformation, and I wanted to know what does the industry say, what do experts say, and I learned a lot from that. So in a nutshell, this is about me. I have two boys, naughty as hell, crazy. They during pandemic, at least I think half of my exercise has been done through my boys. So that's a little bit on the personal side. What we're going to talk in today's session. Now, while I take you through the agenda, the way I usually drive my sessions, it has to be really interactive. And I do believe that everybody who comes into such sessions they're eager to learn, or they're eager to explore. So I'm going to rely a lot on you all being able to answer some of my questions, or probably, feel free that if you don't want to wait till the end of the session, you can just, ask a question even during the session. So let's keep it as informal as possible, and let's keep it a learning session. So today's session is going to be all about what is a dojo. Let's understand, what do we mean by dojo? How do we, when we use the word dojo? Do we mean coding dojos? Do we mean the dojo experience? And what is this new way of working that has come into the organizations? We'll talk about what has been the traditional way and the dojo experience. And then, of course, how do you apply it? How do you apply it within your teams, within your organization? And not to forget, everything that we bring new always needs to be measured. So, what are the metrics to measure the outcomes, the success of these dojos? And then finally, how do we leverage it throughout the organization? So, this is what I'm going to touch upon. They are very deep topics, they require a lot of discussion, but we'll try to keep it as much as insightful as possible. Probably not too deep, but enough for you all to want to go and explore it on your own as well. So let's start with one of our some of the lovely quotes that we have out there. So this quote talks about long-term commitment to new learning and new philosophy is required for any management that seeks transformation. The timid and the faint-hearted and people that expect quick results are doomed to disappointment. So, I wanted to start with this quote because this is very close to what we are going to talk about today. The fact that many a times when we are in such a rush and in our personal lives, we get so busy trying to, make it to probably our delivery timelines, make it to some of our family commitments, and so many variety of things that we tend to compromise on our learning. I feel, I struggle to be able to finish a book nowadays because I'm so busy between my work and my home life. But that is what gives me a satisfaction that, I'm not becoming stagnated, or I'm learning, I'm experiencing something outside what I know. So learning is a very important aspect, whether it's in the organization or in your personal life. And learning can come in different ways, through people, conversations, through books, through videos, through trainings, and several ways. But contributing or giving time to learning is very essential. And probably knowing that that is important is one of the steps that help us be more successful. So let's look at our session as a story now. Okay, now the story is about a team lead, and the team lead has just got into their role, and they're really excited, the promotion, the excitement of being in this role. And she's busy with trying to get the reports in place, trying to see whether delivery milestones have been met, and several other things. And then suddenly she hears an argument in the corridor, and this is before COVID, when we actually had these corridors that we could hear people talking. And she hears this argument in the corridor that why do you keep pushing my defects back? And then the developer says, if you have a problem with how the functionality has been developed, then probably you need to go to the business. And the tester says, you have not developed it right. It's my job to test it, and I'll test it. And it's my job to find the defects. And they're arguing, and they're just not coming to any consensus or a decision. The team lead goes out and asks them, what happened? The developer says, we've again missed our timeline because this great, very smart tester of us refuses to give a go ahead because the defects just keep pouring in. And then the team leads ask the developer, why are the defects pouring in? What happened? Didn't we do a good test? Didn't we do our test at our level? Didn't we build the functionality right? Didn't we do code reviews and several other things? And it's just a ping pong happening. And that's not all that's on ahead. There's a thought that, what is we going to tell the customer? What am I going to tell leadership? How am I going to get the team motivated again? What happened to all the training sessions they went for? Why aren't they applying all that? And she's like wondering, what went wrong? Where did all that training sessions, conversations, discussions, where did it go? Did it just disappear into air? And this is a scenario I'm sure you all are very aware about and have seen it, where we are constantly firefighting. We are firefighting for several things, firefighting to make it to a particular delivery, firefighting to be successful in probably quality, leadership, customer, market response, and several other things. So we look at this complete story as 3S. The situation we just talked about, rising defects, missing deadlines, no time to learn or apply learning. You've gone for trainings, you've gone for certifications. I didn't get a chance to apply it. Sorry, I'm busy solving problems. And ping pongs, handoffs. This is my job, not yours. This is, why aren't you doing your job kind of a thing? I'll complete mine, I'll pass it on to you, and several of those aspects. What are the symptoms of such situations? So if you do a discovery when such a situation arises, and it's a very basic situation, the first thing that probably comes up is that you've got functional silos. Probably the business is separate, the engineering or the development is separate, and your testing is a separate group. And then, of course, you've got operations and several other areas that are functional silos. So there are a lot of handoffs happening there. You have a lot of delivery pressure that's happening. So you're constantly, and especially, now that the market is constantly requiring upgrades, requiring new functionalities to come in, new features. You as a team are constantly under pressure to deliver as soon as possible. And of course, technology upgrade. You cannot stay in legacy code. You cannot stay in the old way of working where, you have your local environments, you don't have, cloud, and you don't have the right technology or programming languages you're working on. And all of those aspects are very essential. And if those are missing, then those again become symptoms or problems. So when you look at the situation and the symptoms, you always think about what would be the solution for such a situation. Now, a solution always requires a lot of investment. And that's when you would hear about solutions like, why don't you move to DevOps? Why don't you think about, doing an agile transformation? And then sometimes you also come up with solutions of learning. Is there a problem where we are learning new things, but we are not being able to apply it? So your solution could be several things. It requires an investment, but your solution should cater to these three aspects. What are the pain points you're trying to solve? What opportunities that you have currently you want to take advantage of? And what improvements will you make in order for those opportunities, in order for that investment to actually have an outcome? And of course, you want to know if you're successful. So how do you know you're successful? So when you're thinking about your solution, when you're thinking about whether it's going to be agile, whether it's going to be, any other methodology or framework, you got to think about whether these investment points or these aspects are being fulfilled. So how does Dojo fit into this? So let me ask if anybody, is comfortable to actually answer this question. You heard about the story, you heard about the analysis. Now, when you think about such a situation and you have probably some of the questions, what is the first thing that would come to your mind when you have such a situation in play? You as a leader, let's assume, what would you do when you see such a chaotic environment in your teams or in your organization? Any thoughts? And you can feel free to mute yourself or use the chat window. All right.
In hypothetical situation, there are two possibilities. Okay.
Yes.
Because one thing is the new team lead or development manager needs to talk to individuals first to understand their own opinion, and then later they can arrange. Usually, we arrange a problem solving session. We try to bring all the people, meaning people who is providing requirement, who is developing, who is testing, who is supporting, who is delivering. So everybody in the table, put the points, create an agenda, come up with action items, and who will take over what, meaning which action to whom.
Right.
This is what my point of view. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you, so Vijay, what you spoke about is something that is exactly what a dojo is. Okay. A dojo, when you hear the word, you know that it's a Japanese word that means learning, or the place of the way. The place of the way means that you have a place, you are learning in that place, but your learning is not one time learning, it's repetitive learning. But how does your learning start? Your learning starts with a need. You come together to know how that need can be solved. Once you brainstorm and discuss what can solve that need, you then identify things or ways that can fulfill that need. And that's exactly what you said, Vijay, but you talked about it as a part of your dev manager, people coming together, brainstorming, talking about the problem, and coming up with what's your next step. And that's Dojo all about. It's finding out the problem, coming up with solutions, finding out what can solve those solutions, and then actually starting to implement. And I'll just take a pause so that y'all can, assimilate what I've just said. So while dojo in the real sense of the Japanese word translates to the place of the way, a place where you learn, but you learn through repetition. So while I'm telling you about the fact that dojo means coming together, brainstorming, coming up with a solution, which sounds very straightforward, right? Anybody could think about that. That's the next step I would do. The difference in a dojo is that it talks about repetition. It talks about doing the same thing repeatedly for a certain duration of time so that whatever you learn sticks. And that is why dojo and learning that sticks actually comes together. So even though we are using a very straightforward, analytical, common sense way of thinking, the only change when you think about dojo is called something like repetition. Doing the same thing again and again and learning while you're doing it. So probably today, when I am doing the same thing, I might do it in a specific way. Tomorrow, I learned something from yesterday. So I'll just evolve and do it better and then better and better. And then I'll become creative. I'll experiment, I'll innovate, and I'll make that the way of working. It just becomes a part of the way I do my work is through learning, through repetition. So before I go forward, how many of you have done anything repetitively? Anything that you've done in your life that's been, don't talk about cooking, all of those things. I do that a lot repetitively, but anything you do repetitively.
In our professional life itself, for
Mm-hmm,
example, uh, on the organization where we have to do monthly reconciliation on our
mm-hmm,
budget and the timeline.
mm-hmm.
So when you work in a French organization, we have a head office level reporting. It needs to be done every month, and
Right.
it needs to be done at department level. Every department, and the template is same, meaning the standard is there, but it is a bit complex. You need to adjust things and do that. And I was working on a Singapore-based bank also. Every month we got invoices, so we need to manage the budget and timeline. So every month it's a repeated work, but of course it's a cumulative of work, right? Budget will be burning every month. So invoices comes in, so we will be spending money. We track it, what is remaining. So every month on the steering committee, we need to present this. So I feel it's a repetitive work, even though numbers are changing, but it's a repetitive work.
Right. And do you feel that your repetitive work is stagnated if you don't bring some learning or some kind of variations in it? Are you all evolving in the way you all do it, or it's always the standard way as you do it throughout?
Not like that. We are optimizing. We are extracting from Jira. We are trying to create pivot tables. We try
Right.
to do automate to some extent. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. So while you are doing something repetitively, you're also learning through it, and you're also evolving. You're trying to meet, the expectations of the environment around you, and you're also becoming more efficient, and you're moving faster. Wouldn't that be right?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Very nice. So let's get into more details about what's a dojo. So on the right, you can see a quote by Benjamin Franklin. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. And probably what I'll do is take a survey after this full session of 1 hour from y'all, and I'll ask y'all how many of y'all remember what I spoke in this, 45 minutes, 1 hour. Okay, and it'll be very interesting to hear how many of y'all remember anything. And you must be wondering, why am I saying that? I'm giving this session, right? But that's the interesting part about listening to a session. Now, when I or any of you, I'm sure, go into a session, probably some of you take notes, or some of you, have just good memory power, so you absorb it. But how long does the information that you got in a session stay with you? How long can you remember what the trainer, what the presenter actually spoke? Think about it. Think about the sessions or the trainings or whatever you've gone through, and how long has that information stayed with you. And when you think about that, think about what would change for you to make you remember a session. Again, question to the group. What do you think would make a difference for you to remember any session, any training, anything where you were given information? What in that session or that training would help you remember, maybe after a month, after 6 months, after a year? What is the difference that we would have to do in that session so that you or anyone who's attending would remember the points or the conversation of that session? What do you think would be required for you to remember?
One is practicing what is been learned, and secondly is spreading the knowledge, is like spreading that knowledge to even further people is
Absolutely.
what I do to remember it for myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Harsha. That is absolutely perfect. So, as you see what's written on the slide, a dojo is an immense immersive learning environment within an organization where teams learn, where product teams specifically learn new skills and new ways to solve problems. Teams apply those skills immediately to their work in the context of their real world constraints and challenges. I apologize for that word. It's context. So, like Harsha mentioned, anything that you learn, if you don't apply it, if you don't apply it in the same environment that you are in, not in a sandbox environment, not in a perfect scenario, where everything is going right, not in those scenarios, in scenarios that are real world constraints and challenges, only then will you be able to learn from it and also evolve or get better at it. Okay, so a dojo basically creates that kind of a learning environment. It gives the teams an opportunity to be able to learn and apply it at the same time, and actually apply it on the work they are doing currently. So let's say you've picked up a particular feature or a functionality or any other work that you're working on. You will not actually pick up a perfect feature where everything is known, no risk, all the information has already been done, all the documentation has been done, and then you start learning or applying on it. No, you'll pick up the actual feature that has to be delivered to the client, and you'll apply learning on that. So either one, you know how to develop that feature, so you don't need to really learn anything. But let's say you have something really complex. Probably it could be that you need to do a migration of your current product to cloud, and in such a case, the migration, you have no idea how to do that migration to cloud. In that case, what dojo does is gives you the ability to be able to learn how to do that, apply it in the functionality that you have to migrate, or probably product or code, and then actually solve the constraints, the risks, and move on from that learning. That's the difference from any other kind of way of working. A dojo talks about learning and applying it and doing all of this as a team. So usually what happens is that you'd have one person who does all the research analysis, comes back and helps the team understand how to apply it. A dojo talks about the whole team brainstorming together, figuring out that one solution, experimenting it, applying it, and then learning from it. There are failures you could come through from it, but how you can mitigate those failures is something we'll talk about. But dojo means applying all your learning or learning while you work. So a couple of things that dojo is very strong about is learning by doing. No standard curriculum, so it's not like a standard training manual or these are the things we are going to follow. Nothing like that. It gets evolved by the team itself, and the team continuously gains skills as they move forward, and the whole team learns these practices. So that's what dojo primarily focuses on. So how does in dojo the learning that sticks? And you heard me talk about the fact that it should be learning that you remembered, and it was mentioned that by applying or probably by speaking the same thing or sharing the knowledge is something you remember. So according to Ebbinghaus, forgetting curve, he's a researcher who tried to do research on what is the memory power of an individual. And what he mentioned is that, let's say you're in a session today, and probably after 15 minutes or half an hour of the session, you would remember around 80 to 90% or probably 70% if you were not distracted. But as the number of hours and days increases, your capability as an individual to actually retain what you heard reduces immensely, and that goes down to around 5 to 10%. No matter how strong your memory capabilities are, we have a very steep forgetting curve. Now, when we have such a steep forgetting curve, that is where it is very important that whatever learning we do gets applied, and it's not just a listening session. And for that to happen, we need to look at some of the aspects that help us stick that learning to us so that we will forever be able to apply it. Explicit knowledge is documentation. You cannot forget it because you can always refer to it. Tacit knowledge is knowledge that lies within a person. Dojo primarily focuses on tacit knowledge. Dojo doesn't say that explicit knowledge is not important, documentation is not important, but what it focuses on is that converse, talk to each other, build each other as a team, brainstorm, try, experiment, and build that tacit knowledge through applying. The other aspect that dojo talks about is holistic learning and continuous learning. Holistic learning means you don't look at only one part of your value stream. You look at your entire value stream and learn that entire bit. Holistic learning allows you to be able to see the complete picture and see which are the points you want to improve. And again, what dojo propagates is, don't look at one part of your value stream, look at the entire value stream and see how you can absorb or learn. And finally, it's a continuous learning. There are no starts and stops. Continuously learning for a very long duration and then going back and seeing how you can sustain it is something that dojo propagates. Any questions, any thoughts around this from anybody from the group? All right. So when we are talking about dojo, we heard of, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Vijay.
Yeah, I'm asking on behalf of all the people, kind of, is there any limitations where dojo should not be done? Any learnings?
And that's my next slide that's coming up. So, but I'd still like to hear everybody else.
Sure. Carry on, Karen.
All right.
If that's a slide already, yeah.
No, but it's good to hear.
I was actually coming from my experience and then, yeah.
Excellent. So we'll hear more from you, Vijay, as well on that slide. All right. Moving ahead. So what are the dojo elements? There are two elements. Some are negotiable and some are not negotiable. Again, let me bring this up to y'all. When you are in this session, you need to think about dojo as what I am explaining to you as a learning. I am not saying whether it is good or bad because I've done these sessions several times and I've had people crowding me and saying, how is this possible? How are you saying this? So I am really looking forward to having those kind of conversations. But again, Dojo talks about not negotiable. So that's strong, not going to be negotiated. And there are some things that can be negotiated. So what are the things that can be, that cannot be negotiated? Learning over delivery. Now, what do we mean by learning over delivery? And I'm sure you all are aware about our Agile Manifesto, where we talk about comprehensive documentation over, working software and all of that. So this is very similar to that. Learning over delivery means that your team or probably multiple teams should focus more on learning in that period of dojo. Though delivery is important, your delivery will slow down. So whoever goes into dojo needs to be very cognizant of the fact that, and probably, the dojo coach should be very upfront that your delivery or your milestones or whatever needs to go to your customer will slow down, because the prime objective of a dojo is learning. It is applying that learning, and because of doing both these aspects, probably you'd slow down in what you need to deliver to your customer. And the reason being is that dojo is a long-term benefit to the team and the organization, and not something that, you do it in a few sprints and then you immediately, can just see the effect immediately. It's a long-term efficiency, learning capability, and team motivation. And that is why it's learning over delivery. So no compromises on that. No trying to speed delivery and compromising on learning. Whole team learns. You cannot have one individual focused on learning and the rest of the team goes and does the regular delivery work. No. The dojo coach or the dojo team expects the team that is going through the dojo that the whole team should participate and be part of that conversation or that learning. Spaced repetition and opportunity for repeated practice. It means that your team should be aware that you're going to be doing the same thing very frequently. And we'll talk about the frequency as well. But, like Vijay mentioned, that was about budgeting, but this is actual development work, okay? There could be different functionality, but you probably will be doing the same practices repeatedly so that it sticks to you. Skilled coaching. So whoever runs a dojo, you would require product coaches, technical coaches to be very skilled in that area to enable learning. So not negotiable on that aspect. And no giving perfect features during learning. No giving that time to the team. You know what? I've identified one team. They can go ahead and be part of the dojo. No. It has to be a team who's in the works of delivery, who's actually working on real-time features, and they are going to apply their learning in those real-time features. And finally, collaborative peer-to-peer learning. So when we say collaborative peer-to-peer learning, that means you're expecting that while you're working as a team and learning, you're also pairing with each other collaboratively to share those learning. Probably a pair, probably more than a pair, but you're doing these kind of breakout sessions to, come up with better ideas and then bring it back to the team to continuously learn. And the final, like a nail on the head, nobody questions failure. So it's a very safe environment to fail. And that failure should, of course, generate an outcome of success from the perspective of over a duration. So while your team could fail, small failures, okay, really small ones, not huge ones, it should also be seen that over a couple of sprints, the team also starts showing that they have actually improved and your failures turn into success. So these are some of the aspects that are non-negotiable in dojo. And then you have the negotiable aspects. That is, what is the kind of learnings or skills the teams will learn? They can choose that. Offerings, when we talk about offerings, they talk about, what is the kind of coaching that will be focused on? Would it be a mix of product and technical? What is the duration? Would it be like, 6 weeks, 10 weeks? Those kind of conversations are still negotiable. So as you can see the slide, your negotiable are very few, your non-negotiable are really large. And that talks about, a little bit of focus and a little bit of guardrails around the dojo that is very focused on, the team learning and the team evolving. Um,
Carol,
this, yes,
Sandeep,
Sandeep.
before
Yes.
moving, I have 2 points.
Yep.
First one is how it is impact on delivery. That is one point. And second point, where it is fit in terms of methodology or the framework.
Very nice question, Sandeep. The first one, where does it fit in terms of methodology and framework? So if you read the book, and that's where I've read it and I've applied it, I would say it's framework agnostic, methodology agnostic, but it takes everything into perspective. So you must have thought while I was talking all these slides, it sounds so much like agile, a little bit of Scrum, and probably in the following slides, it'll be a little bit of lean. So it covers almost all these areas. And this is my practical personal experience that I'm telling you, Sandeep. And in regards to delivery, whenever you go into a dojo, there is a lot of discovery and deep conversations that need to happen with the team leads, development managers, and leadership that don't go into a dojo if you have very critical milestones and deliveries, because dojo is going to impact your deliveries from a perspective of more importance is given to learning. And probably in the time that you're doing your dojo, you might want to be very open and upfront either to your customer or probably to the kind of work that it is going to slow down. So these are some of the things that are very much, true and evident, and it should be also talked about upfront with leadership. Does that answer your question, Sandeep?
Yeah, but again, I know this is an open discussion question, but looks like it is a fit into the waterfall only, because looks like if you are talking about the Kanban or Scrum, definitely it will not fulfill. That is my understanding right now.
Okay, this is Vijay. I just want to add a few points related to this learning over delivery, right? If we follow Agile and Scrum, and in case if we implemented scaling framework like SAFe, we have innovation and planning iteration. That particular 2 weeks or 3 weeks is used mainly for this. This is not related to delivery. If you follow exactly the same way how SAFe prescribed, this is the time we do learning, meaning the team needs some learning on automation testing, or learning on some DevOps related tool, or doing hackathon where we take the pain points and try to address. In that way, in that this line is more applicable, because learning over delivery means that particular 2 weeks or 3 weeks delivery is not a high priority. That particular time team will spend time on improving themselves, or doing hackathon where this kind of dojo kind of things can be achievable. Maybe Vijay, question to you: what is the similar concept available in the other scaling framework like Scrum at scale, less huge? Like maybe you can put your points, Vijay.
I mean, this would be going off the topic, but SAFe is the only generally available scaling frameworks which officially men- mentions it.
Okay, thank you.
Officially mentions it, or make it a part of a framework.
Right. And just
However,
to
others have, yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Vijay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it. I was kind of done. Officially having an iteration, especially for innovation and other topics, SAFe is the only framework as of date. However, others mention it or make a scope for it, but never really creates an event for it or time.
Yeah, if you
Right.
look at the SAFe innovation and planning, correct? The point non-negotiable, learning over delivery, whole team learning, the real world work, everything is matching. Yeah, that's my
Right,
understanding.
right. And
Carol,
while
one quick question.
um,
Sorry.
sorry, just to answer Vijay's
Go ahead.
question and Sandeep's as well. So while we have a specific, duration or sprints that are dedicated to that learning, what Dojo talks about is similar to that, but is actually while you are working. So maybe a little bit of variations where those sprints specifically could be focused on in a more safer environment to try, innovation. Dojo is not giving you that safe environment. It's telling you to actually learn while you are developing or doing your migration or creating, maybe some new way of technology upgrades or any of that. It is doing it while you are working with all the constraints that exist currently. Sorry, go ahead. Who did
Yeah,
you jump
sorry.
in? Yeah,
I have two questions.
yeah,
When almost all the uh, points which we discussed here been covered in either one of the frameworks which we have been
correct,
discussing so far, then
correct, right.
what is the implication does it have in the industry when we are undergoing this dojo? That is first question.
All
And
right.
second one is, how does dojo coach getting differed from agile coach?
Very
And,
nice questions.
and third one, which section are we undergoing this dojo practice? Because people does not have find time to go for multiple sessions. Like say for example, in the delivery itself, people go for spike exploration.
Correct, correct.
That
Right,
being the case, where do the people have? They need to undergo training. They need to go learning. Everything is there. But on
correct.
top of it, what implication does dojo have in the industry? Had any projects followed this, or is to be followed, or is it emerging out now?
So you had three questions. I don't know if I'll
Right.
remember all of them, but what I remember is, like I said, the forgetting curve. So the first is, yes, there are many organizations that are applying dojo, but after they have assessed whether the teams are right for that kind of dojo, and I will just cover that in the slides. So if you're fitting that need, then only you should go for dojo. If you're not fitting that need, and I'll talk about what are those needs, then you should definitely not go for a dojo. So it's not something that you just pick up one day and say, oh, I want to do a dojo. It has a lot of implications, a lot of risks that you could come across. And that is why whenever you're thinking about a dojo, you should first think about, is your team or your organization ready to make that kind of investment? Okay.
Even without dojo, currently people are following it through some way of learning, through some way
Correct.
of exploration of the spikes. So, what is
Correct.
the necessity of for me to have undergoing this dojo experience or learning through dojo?
Right, right. And again, like I mentioned, I wanted you all to have these questions because that is what the questions that come up even when you bring this dojo up. But I will talk about why is dojo so different and being looked upon as something that is adding value to the teams. But at the same time, it is a lot of investment by the teams, and sometimes it could also fail if not given the right environment to succeed. Okay, like for example, um, probably the questions you want to ask your teams are, is the team working on something that could be used as an example for other teams to learn from? So is that something that the team is working on that is in a safer place that can slow down and other teams can learn from it, and it's not in isolation only for this team? So it's got a bigger impact on the organization. Is the team free from deadlines? Are they not constrained to meeting certain deadlines, but more in an environment where they can actually learn and then spread that knowledge across the organization, making it a very quick time to actually learn? And finally, will these teams that are going to dojo help improve the overall product, having a multiplier effect on other products as well in the organization? So these are some of the things that really you should answer for a team before they get into a dojo. And I would say now, I think we can hold on to questions till I come to the slide of why is it different. Okay. So traditional training and dojo training, we already talked about. Traditional training is start and stop. Dojo is the whole team and practicing what you learn. So in your traditional training, probably you'll have a sandbox environment. You'll do your assessments within that time frame of 1 day, an hour, or 2 days. Dojo is a longer duration of applying and doing the assessments. And Dojo talks about a 6 week investment of the team in a dojo. And we'll talk about why 6 weeks as well. But these are some of the differences between traditional training and dojo. Vijay, can you keep me true to time? I think we are coming close, so I would need to just keep me true to time because I don't know what the time is currently. So let's look at dojo as an intake process. So first, dojo is before you start a dojo experience with the team, you need to do an overview. You need to understand or make the teams understand what is dojo about, build awareness, build the interest, let them know the kind of investment of time, risk to delivery, the kind of learning that you're going to get. All of that is needed to be explained to your team or your organization before going into dojo. Consult. What the coaches usually do is that they set expectations and learning about the team. So they primarily you would expect a dojo coach to be able to explain or answer some of the questions of the team or ask questions like, what products are you working on? How does the work flow into throughout the team? When and where are you engaged? What do you hope to learn in a dojo? What is preventing you, like a question that has already been asked, what's preventing you from learning today that you feel a dojo would help you? What is the expected outcome that you are expecting to get? And how do you think this dojo will help the overall organization? So these are some of the consult or conversations that need to happen to the team before you can even think about going into a dojo. And the answers that come from these questions are very important to decide whether dojo is the right place to go. Chartering after overview and consult, and let's say the team is ready to actually invest 6 weeks and 2.5 days of sprint. Okay, so we are looking at 6 weeks of learning, and this 6 weeks has 2.5 days of sprint. That means after every 2.5 days, you will do the same practices again, and then again after 2.5 days, next practices. So it's repetition that's happening. If by consult everybody's in agreement, then you get into the chartering phase. In the chartering phase, you would more or less, it'll be a half-day activity. You will do a bit of discovery with the team. You will talk about what is the goal you want to achieve. You will talk about what these goals are going to impact the organization. What are the outcomes you're expecting to achieve from it? And all of these discussions happen in your chartering. Something that's mentioned over here. And there's a lot of focus in a dojo on technical. So it'll talk about architecture. It'll talk about better code. It'll talk about if you have to do any technology upgrades, if you want to start moving to cloud, probably moving to a better continuous integration, continuous delivery, deployment, and you want to change your entire stack of, kind of tools that you're using. You're re-looking at your database structure. Several of these things really support dojo, because dojo is talking about applying what you're learning, and that is where the learning comes into place, using new tools, using new technology stacks, and all of those aspects. Now, this is what a dojo looks like. It is 6 weeks, 2.5 days sprint, and every 2.5 days, you'll do a sprint planning. You'll do some amount of delivery work, and we call it discovery delivery, because you learn and apply. Then you'll do a review where you'll actually demonstrate what you did, and then a retrospective to learn from. And in these 2.5 days, along with the team, you need to, as a coach or as a person who's leading this, you need to talk about what is the kind of work that you're planning for these sprints. They have to be small. They have to be something that is contributing to learning and applying. And they have to be a discussion around slicing them to be like, in a day you're able to complete certain lines of code, so that you're having better code reviews, or you're improving the way you write code, or probably you've actually started understanding how you can migrate your legacy code using maybe strangler fig theory or some of those theories, and taking those small items, slicing them down, and doing those repetitively throughout your 6 weeks using a 2.5 day sprint constantly. So, sprint planning, development as a team, you sit in one room, all of you all sit together, somebody opens up the complete code on their machine or whatever else you're developing, and the whole team swarms and puts their brain to it and actually contributes. It's like mob programming, or sometimes probably you do pair programming, test driven development, all of these aspects, or even AUT. All of these aspects come into play when you are doing dojo. And that is why the technical aspects are very strongly propagated in a dojo. And then, of course, once you finished with the 6 weeks, you have exit interviews to talk about whether those 6 weeks are sufficient, or do you want to increase your dojo time? And probably you can go to 8 weeks or 10 weeks, but not more than that. After that, the team takes a call whether they'd like to go back to their normal sprints, but apply those same practices. So they've learned how to do probably test driven development. They've started writing AUTs. Probably they've also improved the code that they've written. They've reduced their technical debt. They've learned how to migrate their work to cloud, probably some of the legacy code also, how to actually transfer that. These are some of the practices they've learned, and now they can go back to their normal sprint and start applying it in their normal way of working, and also applying the practice of working as a team rather than in silos. Have you all got a sense of why is it a little different from the regular way of other frameworks and other methodologies? Any questions around this one?
One question on, is there any suggestion on the team size, minimum, maximum?
Yes, the team size around this is very similar to the team size that we talk about in Agile or Scrum. Around 9 to 10 should be a good fit, because you're talking about the whole team learning. So anything less than that or up to that should be good enough. Nothing more than that, otherwise it becomes very difficult to learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will it include Scrum Master and Product Owner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it includes all the roles. It includes a Scrum Master, a Product Owner, a Dojo Manager. You have those kind of roles as well. And the coaches that are expected are two coaches. One is your product coach and one is your technical coach. Of course, if you have one coach who has both those knowledges, then that should be good. But probably the best way to go in a dojo is to have two coaches. It could be a product or process coach as well as your technical coach.
Okay.
Now, I was expecting you all to ask me a question. Why 2.5 days? What is why do you feel that 2.5 days or 3 days is what dojo is proposing? And I'll answer it is because if you take 2 weeks and you take 2 weeks to do something like a planning and a retro and a actual application of something, it becomes too long a duration to actually learn something and apply it repetitively. But dojo talks about doing it in smaller time limits, so that even if you fail, there are small failures that you can make up for in the next sprint and the next sprint. It also gives you an ability to pick up smaller things, apply your learning, and then move on either to the next thing, or probably if you've not really been able to learn anything, again apply it in the next sprint. So the repetition fosters learning, and the frequent retrospectives also lead to a proper mindset. So these are some of the reasons why we have a 2.5 day sprint. When is
You know,
do Yeah.
sorry, I'm not taking much time. As you said, 2.5 days, but looks like there is the planning, then execution, retro, and
Correct,
everything
correct.
is there. But looks like it is a time-consuming process. There is one point. Second one is like in the Scrum, we have a spike story where we are doing same thing in one sprint and we'll try to implement in second sprint. Then why these 2.5 hours?
2.5 days, right.
Sorry.
Yes, you're right. When we started off working with the teams in Dojo, that was the same question that came up, that we don't believe we can deliver anything in 2.5 days. And probably we are not sure whether we can even slice anything so small that we can learn from it in those 2.5 days. So it is a challenge. Let's be very honest about it, that it is a challenge to be able to slice work in those 2.5 days and actually, learn from it and change that mindset. But when it is a duration of 6 weeks, after 3 sprints, we started seeing the team actually get the hang of it. From the fact that as a team, you need to understand that your planning cannot be 1 hour. It's very short because it's for a smaller duration. Your retrospective itself is only 15 minutes. Your stand up lands up being around, 5 to 10 minutes. And that is why all your practices also become very short and small. And if you've experienced a 2 week sprint, it takes a very long time for a team to actually get a feel of why we are doing a planning, why we are doing a refinement, why we are doing a retrospective. In a dojo, because the teams are doing it so frequently, the teams really get an essence of the value around having a planning. They also have more items to discuss in a retro because the duration of each sprint is so small. They kind of remember everything that's happening within those 3 days. So the smaller the time box, the more often you remember things. And it also helps you start seeing smaller things to start delivering, and how small you can slice something that can still have some value. So these are some of the reasons why Dojo says to have a 2.5 days, so that it becomes more repetitive and also allows you to be able to do the same things again and again. Sandeep, it's a challenge currently that most people that are doing dojos are facing, and it's a valid thought. But what I'm trying to state is that it's something that has to be tried and tested, and it has to have a safe environment to apply as well.
Okay.
When is dojo not a good fit for the team? If the team isn't open and willing to commit to learning, if a team has many remote workers who can't come to the shared location, so probably then you would not want to have a dojo. If the team is not full stack and cross functional, again, don't go for a dojo. And if a team wants to learn practices and skills but does not have the relevant people to actually help or be part of it, then probably you should not go for a dojo. And I think that goes to Vijay's question as well, that when should you not go for a dojo? So these are some of the reasons that are mentioned.
But I believe the second point, I don't think so it's valid. Even though you're working remotely, with this current situation in the last 2 years, we are achieving many things with virtual sharing,
Correct.
sharing the screen, even
Absolutely.
Miro, Mural, many tools, collaborative tools available. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And we tried this in a remote way and it works really well. Of course, we had everybody virtually coming for 4 hours together while we, actually coded and did everything together. So I would agree with you that, you can do it remotely. But of course, if you have everybody in one room, conversations happen much more streamlined and you have more brainstorming also using whiteboards and all of those things.
That's true. We might have had this presentation 2 years back. What you're saying is correct, but now
Right.
things are moving. Yeah.
I agree. So how do you choosing teams that have the dojo experience? We talk about who doesn't fit in our dojo, we want to talk about how do you choose the right set of teams, and we already talked about the fact that you need to have cross-functional teams, you need to have teams that are probably having the right set of product and services to actually work in a dojo, and you need to also have the right sense of support from leadership. All of these aspects are very essential for you to be able to actually have or implement dojo within your organization. Some of the questions that usually come from the teams when they are saying that, how would a dojo really fit us is something that, is good for you to know about. These are the questions that they ask is that, how would I be able to really utilize that 2.5 days so that the whole team is able to learn? In the sense that in 2.5 days, when currently 2 weeks is not essential, doesn't work out for us, how can 2.5 days really work for us? So that's one of the questions that teams really cannot understand, that if we struggle to deliver something in 2 weeks, how can we do that in 2.5 days? That again has to have a lot of impact on your product backlog, on slicing it right. And that's why having the right product backlog before you get into a dojo is very important. How can does everybody in the team have to be there? So sometimes what happens is a critical defect comes up and you have to remove a certain person to fix that or give a hot fix. So how do you handle such situations in a dojo? Are we expecting that that person does not leave the dojo and somebody else fixes that defect? Yes, that is the expectation of a dojo, that whoever commits to being part of a dojo should be committed to that team and learning. And if that commitment is not there, then probably that team should not really get into a dojo experience. Some of the things that we should be cognizant about when getting ready: align with the strategy. If it's not aligning with the strategy or the organization outcome, please don't go for a dojo. Focus on the entire value stream and what you want to achieve, or the practices you want to improve in the entire value stream. Make sure that you have a visual depiction of what are those practices and what you want to achieve, and define boundaries. You do not want to go all over the place when you're doing a dojo. Define boundaries of what you want to actually achieve. And finally, make sure you have measurements to measure whether your dojo is successful or no. Probably you want to take a check and take a call whether it is meeting its outcomes, and then course correct. I will move on to getting to the value stream. So in a dojo, probably you'd want to look at the entire value stream and look at it very simplistically. Look at the business hypothesis. What is the objective in terms of the customer, that value that you want to fulfill? And at the end, are you fulfilling the customer value? And in between is, your value stream that you look at: the discovery, the framing, the delivery, and the deployment and operations. The next step that you do for a dojo is, in your discovery, you'll do a product canvas, customer interviews, personas, story mapping. All of these aspects is very essential to do in the discovery. Then you get into framing. Would domain-driven design work for you? Is slicing that is required? Do you need customer journey mapping? Do you need product tests that you need to look at the framing? And then from a delivery perspective, what are the engineering practices you want to apply? Do you want to do test-driven development? Do you want to go for continuous integration? Are you looking at cloud or cloud native? Are you looking at moving from monolithic to microservices? And then you also look at deployment and operations. Where do you want to go for infrastructure as a service? You want to do auto scaling, monitoring, chaos engineering, and so on and so forth. So you have to look at the entire value stream. You have to identify within your discovery what are the areas you want to focus on, and then you need to build out where you're going to have a focus. And that's when you have a discussion with your team and you cancel out some of the things. So over here, you can see what we've done is we've looked at product canvas, persona, story mapping, and we've talked about domain driven design as being the framing to actually go into that practice of learning. Under delivery, we are looking at moving from monolithic to microservices. And under deployment and operations, you're looking at infrastructure as a service and monitoring. And that is how you chalk out your value stream. You identify the practices, cancel out things that you don't think are relevant right now, and focus on only few practices that you want to achieve. Metrics to measure. So in these aspects, the metrics you want to measure, the leading indicators are number of teams that completed the dojo successfully and the people that were part of it. And your team-based improvements would be your automation, your code quality, number of defects that have reduced, your cycle time, and your velocity. And of course, your economic improvements would be your increase in sales and cycle time reduction for value delivery and other aspects. Usually we talk a little bit more about this, but I just want to give you all a glimpse that these are some of the metrics that are measured when you're going through dojo. And we are expecting to look at this not after 6 weeks. The 6 weeks is the focus dojo, but after that, after a month that they have moved out of dojo, there is a check that's done to see whether these are some of the things that have improved and whether there is any outcome that has been generated after the dojo. So how do you leverage dojo throughout the organization? To enable dojos throughout the organization, you would need to look at some of these aspects. Dojo is not easy to apply, and always remember, why not try agile or your regular sprints? Why go for dojo? Go for dojo only if you want to solve a major problem, probably reduce technical debt, refactoring, automation, move to continuous integration, all of those things. Don't go for dojo because you want to bring agility into the organization. You can use different frameworks and methodology. It has to be focused on learning. It has to be a compromise on delivery and slowing down. Another aspect is silo. If you've got silos within the organization like dev, QA, all of that, probably a conversation around that needs to happen, and a discussion around how that's going to be solved while doing a dojo is something that needs to be looked at. Compliance issue, architectural flaws, product thinking versus delivery bias, and technical practices are some of the areas to focus on while you're thinking of going into dojo. So take all of these, club it into a small group, identify the features that you can slow down on, and try it as an experiment. And that's what dojo talks about. Experiment, innovate, learn, and apply. And then apply it on a large scale. So that is how I would close our session today. Use dojo to experiment on breaking your silos, bringing technical practices in a smaller team, in a shorter duration with repetitive learning, and then apply it on a larger scale where you would have all the learnings applied and other teams can learn from it as well.